You are watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to my top 10 favorite movies of all time. As with my top 10 video games, this is not necessarily definitive. In fact, this was even harder to narrow it down to 10 because there are so many great films, but this is the best I could do, and there will be a lot of honorable mentions when we get to that point. So without further ado, let's jump right into number 10. Number 10, The Matrix. Say what you want about its sequels, although I think they're pretty alright as well. But the first Matrix, I feel, was done so well that I can't find a single fault in it. I think the biggest reason that the first Matrix is so much better than the sequels is it takes place entirely within the Matrix, pretty much. I love the concept of the whole world being an illusion, and The Matrix was really the first thing I've ever seen that did that. I'm not saying it was the first thing, but it was the first thing I saw that had that. This was also the first R-rated movie I was allowed to watch, which is funny because it was originally supposed to be PG-13 anyway. Plus, I love Morpheus as a character. The Matrix is a really good movie, and the sequels are decent. I know that they're not perfect, and the third one's probably the hardest to watch, but the first Matrix movie is definitely my number 10 favorite movie. Number 9, V for Vendetta. Again, this is another thing about everything being kind of a lie. I mean, in a different sense. It's, rebelling against authority and things like that. I do feel like its message has kind of been bastardized in recent years, but I still love the film, and I still think it holds up very well. V is just such a good character, and, the whole dystopian future thing, I feel was really done well in that movie, as well as a few other movies. But as far as dystopian futures go, V for Vendetta would have to be my favorite dystopian future movie. Number 8, A Clockwork Orange. This movie is an incredibly violent movie, although I think people definitely overplay that. Honestly, it's not as bad as everyone makes it out to. It's no Serbian film, that's for damn sure. But nevertheless, despite its controversy, it is one of the best movies I've ever seen. It has a lot of good character development, and the theme song was actually used in the intro to Conker's Bad Fur Day. In fact, the whole intro to Conker's Bad Fur Day was a reference to the intro to A Clockwork Orange. I think part of what makes me like it so much is I really like flawed characters, and Clockwork Orange has no shortage of them. And I feel like Alex is such a likable bad person character, there's a lot of those. And I like that the point of view of this story is from a bad guy, a degenerate, someone who wants to go out, rape people, and kill people, and do all sorts of violent shit. But yet he's our protagonist. It's very interesting to see that take. Plus it's Stanley Kubrick, and you can't go wrong with a Kubrick film. Number 7, Saw. The entire Saw series, specifically Saw 1, 6, and 7, though, are my 3 favorites of it. Although I love all of the Saw films. A lot of people will dismiss Saw as simple torture porn or, a splatter film, but I feel like to an extent it sort of has a message behind it, that everyone should live their life to the fullest and try to be a good person and try to better themselves, and to appreciate what they have. John Kramer, or Jigsaw, is actually not really a bad person, he just does horrible things with good intentions. He wants to help these people and improve them. There's a line in, I believe, Saw 5, where they have an argument about whether or not people deserve a chance. Him and Hoffman do. And I love that line because he doesn't deserve a chance. Everyone deserves a chance. I love John Kramer, and I love Tobin Bell. Great actor. Great film. Number 6, Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko was a film I had to watch twice to really understand what the fuck happened at the ending. It's a movie about time travel, it's about ghosts going back in time, it's about a guy who was meant to die but continues on living anyway, and he goes on and all sorts of crazy shit happens, and the world is supposed to end in 29 days or something like that. It's an absolutely fantastic film, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend you do. Number 5, The Lord of the Rings trilogy. I absolutely love The Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I also like The Hobbit, but not as much. I'd have to say if I had to pick one of the 3, it would have to be The Two Towers, but they're all amazing movies. J.R.R. Tolkien really knew how to write a good book, and Elijah Wood really shines in this movie, as does Andy Serkis. Everybody in these films does a great job, and it's definitely my favorite fantasy universe. Number 4, Logan. I actually had to update this list after I saw Logan. It's an amazing movie. I won't spoil it, but it's a very different tone to any other superhero movie I've ever seen. It's sad, it's action-packed, it's dark, it's gritty, and it's also kind of a road trip movie. It's also pretty funny, and it was rated R, which was really good for a Marvel film, I feel, because superhero movies, I feel, are done better when they are able to have more creative freedom. Number 3, Psycho. I absolutely love the Psycho films, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I've talked about them a few times on this channel, but I honestly don't do them justice with even just the videos I have up. Psycho was the film that popularized the slasher genre. And while it wasn't technically the first slasher, it was one of the first. And it was the first one to really be a big success. Plus it has Hitchcock's style of horror, where everything is left in your head rather than outright shown to you on the screen, which I really admire. Psycho 1 and 4 are definitely the 2 best, but all of them are worth watching. Number 2, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Everything is perfect in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's a 3-hour long movie, which I feel actually is very justified in this case. It's just enough to get the story across, and it has lots of detail, but it doesn't feel like it drags. The characters are great, the setting is great, and the music is the best fucking soundtrack I have ever heard in a movie. Particularly the Ecstasy of Gold, which I recommend you look up if you haven't heard. My favorite character would have to be Tuco, or the Ugly as he's referred to. But if you haven't seen it, I'll give a brief rundown. It's about 3 outlaws trying to find $200,000 in gold. Which on its own doesn't sound like anything different, but again, this is an old movie, and it does it so well that it merited a place on this list. And in fact, it was the first Western I ever actually enjoyed. I'm actually not the biggest fan of the Western genre, but this movie is awesome, and if you haven't seen it, you need to. Now on to the honorable mentions. As I said at the beginning, this is one of the most difficult things to do because there's so many things that could have been on this list. First up, the Star Wars saga, the original saga, meaning the films 1 through 6. Particularly the original trilogy, but I do like the prequels as well, despite what many people say. Then, of course, you got the Jurassic Park series. I love all 4 of those films. And pretty much anything with Tim Curry in it, particularly the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Clue, and to a lesser extent Stephen King's It, at least the first half of it. I also really like the film 300, as well as the Nightmare on Elm Street and Child's Play series. There's a lot of film series I absolutely love, so as you can tell, this was a very hard list to make. And in no way is it 100% definitive, however, I would say at least 3 through 1 I'm pretty consistent on, other than, of course, updating it to include Logan. I also really like a lot of trauma films that could have possibly been on this, as well as a lot of other movies. I could just go on and on for days about this, honestly. Just know that I like quite a lot of movies, and if you've heard of it, I probably like it, unless it's more recent, in which case, then it's about 50-50. Because I do feel like with modern films, it's either hit or miss. They're either really good or really shit. But enough of my rambling on, let's get on to number 1. Number 1, Fight Club. I absolutely love Fight Club. Tyler Durden is one of my all-time favorite fictional characters ever, if not my favorite fictional character ever. And of course, I do feel this is Brad Pitt's best ever role, and I'd say the same thing for Edward Norton as well. I won't spoil the twist, but I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about, and it's one of the best film twists I've ever seen at the end of Fight Club. And I like how it kind of parodies society and shows how stupid the concept of society is, while at the same time also showing how overboard people can go in extremism. I've never thought of Tyler as a villain. I always thought he was a really good character and, maybe a little bit misguided, but definitely feel like his mind is kind of in the right place in some aspects. I mean, obviously he does go a little bit over the top in some of the stuff he does in this movie, but that's part of what makes me like him so much. And when it boils right down to it, as a society, I do think that we have become kind of dependent, and I think that this movie is a good example of showing that. I'd also like to mention I do like the book of Fight Club, but I actually do think in this case the movie is considerably better. If you don't know Fight Club, it's just basically about these 2 guys that start an underground fight club that evolves into an all-out revolution. But giving it the most basic of descriptions like that is really doing it a disservice, so if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Obviously, with it being, in my opinion, the definitive best movie ever, I cannot recommend it enough. This has been Fugitive Red Eye, and you let me know if you want to see more of this type of content, and obviously let me know if you enjoyed this, and you have a great rest of the day.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.